So let's discuss the elbow joint, and then we'll talk about the radio-ulnar joint. So the first thing when we're looking at joints, we should look at the bones. And we have the humerus, which articulates with the radius, which is on the lateral or thumb side, if you're an anatomical 0. And also the ulna, which is on the medial or the pinky side. So here we have the humerus on the bottom here, and we have the ulna and the radius. So on the articular surface of the humerus, you have the trochlea, which articulates with the olecranon process of the ulna. And then over here on the lateral side, you have the capitulum, which articulates with the radial head of the radius. Here are two other views. We have a lateral view, so you can see the olecranon process here, articulating with the trochlea, and then you can also see the radial head articulating with the capitulum. And then from a posterior view, you can see the olecranon process on the medial side, and then the radial head and the capitulum on the lateral side. So what are the movements of our elbow joint? Pretty straightforward. We have flexion, so raising your hand closer to your glenohumeral joint, and extension, which is extending your elbow joint back down to anatomical 0. So the elbow joint, it doesn't go straight down. You also have something called the carry angle, and that's the angle between the axis of the humerus and the axis of the forearm. And here's your carry angle. And we'll measure that in lab next week. Usually it's 10 to 15% in males, and it tends to be 20 to 25 degrees, 10 to 15 degrees in males, and 20 to 25 degrees in females. And you can think of some loading that might be on some of the collateral ligaments based on the carrying angle, or more importantly, an excessive carrying angle. So let's look at these ligaments. So here you have a view of your humerus, and here's your trochlea, your capitulum, here's the ulna. And so on the ulnar side, we have what's called the ulnar collateral on both sides of the joint ligament. And then on the radial side, you have the radial collateral ligament. And also, if you try to articulate the humerus, the capitulum with the radial head, it's just a shallow surface of the radial head on this curved surface of the distal end of the humerus. And so you have this annular ligament of the radius, which basically holds that part of the joint in place. And here's another view of on B, another view of the annular ligament that just kind of encapsulates the capitulum and the radial head and kind of holds them together. And then you see you have the radial collateral ligament, and then a different viewpoint where you have the ulna on this view, which is the ulnar collateral ligament. And these are for stability. So you have your collateral ligaments. And basically, they avoid, these collateral ligaments of the elbow joint avoid AB and adduction of the elbow joint, which the elbow joint should not move through, right? The main function of the elbow joint is flexion and extension. All right, now we go to the radio-ulnar joint, a very misunderstood joint. It's a very long joint running down the midsection of your forearm between the radius and the ulna, and it has an interosseous membrane that holds it together. So the bones, again, are the radius and the ulna, and the joint, again, is long. The motions, pronation and supination. So if you're flex your elbow and put your palms up, and then rotate to put your palms down, that's pronation, and then put your palms back up, that is supination. Or you can hold a bowl of soup, pronation, you drop the soup. So what does it look like in the skeleton? And you should test this on the skeleton when you're in the lab. So it's basically the radius moves over the ulna. And so here you're in supination, and then when you go into pronation, or the dorsal side of your hand up, you can see the radius flips over the ulna, and they're kind of crisscross in pronation, and they are parallel in supination. So the ulna remains stationary, the radius moves over the ulna.